Hey everyone! Welcome back to Infinite Curiosity. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to invite you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Today we're looking at a time of immense change for both Mexico and the United States. It's the year 1830. Mexico had just gained its independence from Spain about a decade earlier in 1821, but the country was in complete chaos. After 11 years of revolution and conflict, it was like an old house on the verge of collapse. Mexico was one of the largest countries in the Americas at that time, but it faced huge internal struggles. Tensions within the government created an unstable environment that kept the population on edge. Without a solid plan for governing after the revolution, various groups started fighting for power. The economy was in ruins, and with a population spread out over its vast territory of about 1.7 million square miles, the challenges seemed impossible to overcome. Corruption and the ineffectiveness of the governments that followed one after another only made things worse. As if that weren't enough, Mexico was also under threat of potential invasions by Spanish forces based in Cuba. Can you imagine the tension in the air? It was a recipe for disaster. Fast forward to the 1840s. The United States was expanding, but this expansion was built on conflict with Native American nations. The U.S. had also acquired the vast Louisiana territory from the French. This made it even more tempting for Americans to look south, towards Mexico. But let's not forget about Texas. Texas declared its independence from Mexico in 1836. Initially, the United States was hesitant to annex Texas. Why? Well, mainly because of concerns about adding another slave state to the Union. The issue of slavery became a hot-button topic that divided the country. Can you see how complicated this was? Both sides had their reasons, and they were deeply intertwined with the politics of the time. The desire for expansion clashed with moral and ethical principles, creating a climate of constant tension. Then came President James K. Polk, a strong believer in westward expansion. After being elected in 1844, he pushed for the annexation of Texas and set his sights on California and New Mexico. Polk offered to buy these lands, but the Mexican government flat out rejected his offer. This was a classic case of, I want what you have, but I don't want to pay for it. In an attempt to provoke a conflict, Polk ordered troops into the disputed territory between the Rio Grande and Nueces River. Can you imagine how tense the situation must have been? On April 25, 1846, Mexican cavalry attacked American soldiers, marking the beginning of a brutal conflict. That was the spark that ignited the flames of war. Now, there was a key player in this whole saga, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. He was a controversial figure. He didn't initially support independence from Spain, but he eventually became a major player in Mexico's early government. After being ousted from power and exiled, he saw the war as a chance to regain his influence. He promised to defend Mexican territory, but secretly he was also in talks with U.S. representatives. It's like a political thriller, right? As the war went on, U.S. forces started winning important battles. In New Mexico, General Stephen Watts Kearny took control without any bloodshed. Imagine that. He marched into Santa Fe and claimed the territory for the United States. Meanwhile, in California, Commodore John D. Sloat was making moves to secure San Francisco Bay. Mexican forces were caught off guard, and it seemed like the U.S. had the upper hand. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. American troops faced their share of difficulties too. At the Battle of Monterrey, they encountered fierce resistance. And let's not forget the challenges faced by Santa Anna's army. Desertions were rampant. Many soldiers were recruits with little motivation to fight for leaders they didn't trust. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of war, not just on the battlefield, but also on the families left behind, worrying about their loved ones. With their superior naval power, the United States was able to launch a campaign that would take them deep into Mexico. General Winfield Scott carried out the first major amphibious landing in U.S. history at Veracruz. The city was heavily fortified, but eventually, U.S. forces managed to take control. This was a turning point in the war, and set the stage for an advance toward Mexico City. Santa Anna was determined to defend the capital. He strategically positioned his troops at Cerro Gordo, anticipating the Americans' moves. But General Scott was cunning. He sent his cavalry ahead to gather intelligence, and when they revealed Santa Anna's position, it led to a decisive battle that further weakened the Mexican defenses. Scott's strategic planning was crucial at this point, showing how wars weren't just won with brute force, but also with clever thinking and planning. The final push towards Mexico City saw intense fighting, with significant battles like Molino del Rey, and Chapultepec. U.S. troops eventually occupied the capital, and as the battles raged on, the Mexican government crumbled under the weight of defeat. Santa Anna's grip on power weakened, and political turmoil added to the chaos. The Mexican people, who had endured so much suffering, were at a crossroads, questioning the loyalty of their leaders and the future direction of their country. The war eventually ended with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. The United States gained control of Texas, California, and New Mexico. It was a significant territorial expansion, but it came at a high price. Mexico received $15 million in compensation, a paltry sum for the vast territories it had lost. However, this treaty didn't just redraw the map, it left a mark on the collective memory of both nations. But what's interesting is how this conflict didn't just redraw maps, but also left deep marks on the cultures of both countries. The war sowed the seeds of resentment, and the effects were felt for generations. In Mexico, anti-American sentiment grew, which also affected diplomatic relations in the years that followed. On the other hand, the conquest also fueled a sense of nationalist pride in the United States, which saw territorial expansion as a manifestation of its manifest destiny. Now, let's think about the long-term implications of this conflict. The borders we know today were reshaped, and the cultural impacts were profound. It wasn't just about land, it was about people, identities, and histories that were forever changed. And it raises important questions about colonialism, nationalism, and the legacy of such conflicts. The story of the Mexican-American War isn't just a tale of battles and borders, but also of the lives that were impacted by political and military decisions. In the midst of this complexity, we also find cultural resistance. Despite the war, Mexican heritage continued to thrive. The fusion of indigenous and Spanish cultures remained alive through traditions, art, and music. Today we can see how this cultural legacy continues to influence Mexico and its national identity. The festivities, the cuisine, and the art reflect the richness of a history that has survived adversity. So, what can we learn from the Mexican-American War? It's a complex story of ambition, conflict, and the human spirit. As we look back, let's also reflect on how these historical events shape our present. How do you think this war impacts Mexico and the United States today? The relationship is complex, and while we've made progress, there are still echoes of this conflict in contemporary politics and culture. Also, let's think about the future. History doesn't stop, it keeps flowing. Relations between Mexico and the United States have evolved, and while there are challenges, there are also opportunities to build bridges. Mexican culture has deeply influenced American life, from food to art and music. Who hasn't enjoyed a delicious taco or a vibrant Day of the Dead festival? These are expressions that speak to a rich shared history, even amidst tensions. If you enjoyed this exploration of history and want to delve deeper into topics like this, make sure to subscribe to Infinite Curiosity. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Also, if you have any questions or if there's any related topic you'd like us to explore in the future, don't hesitate to mention it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring.